welcome to the Italian Wine Podcast. I'm Rebecca Lawrence and this is Voices. In this set of interviews, I will be focusing on issues of inclusion, diversity and allyship through intimate conversations with wine industry professionals from all over the globe. If you enjoy listening, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. Any amount helps us cover equipment, production and publication costs, and remember to subscribe and rate our show wherever you tune in.
Da 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 da. Привет. Меня зовут Stevie Kim. All right, that's enough. Welcome to Italian Wine Podcast, Russian edition. Voices with Eleonora Scholes. Good morning. Buongiorno.
How are you?
How are you? Oh my gosh, it's been such a long time. They didn't have anybody available, so I hope you're okay with me.
Well, I'm totally delighted and honored,
Eleonora, so how have you been? I haven't seen you in the longest time, of course, because of COVID.
No, I'm perfectly fine. And I've been doing things from home. So obviously I changed the modality as everybody has done. And I think I'm quite happy doing things from here because I get more intimate look into wineries and wines. I can spend more time tasting wines, understanding what's going on in the wineries. And I actually do like this one-to-one approach rather than blanket tastings. But from September, everything seems to have exploded, really. So I've been traveling a lot and doing lots of things and been to Alto Adige and now going to Piemonte this weekend. So yeah, things seem to appear to be getting back to normal, really.
So what are you doing in Piemonte this weekend?
There is an event for Nizza. So they are doing just a very short 2-day event explaining the vineyards and having an e-bike tour around their best vineyards. And then I think also meeting the producers and obviously some tastings. So it's very quick but quite intense.
So, Eleonora, would you mind, for the benefit of our audience, presenting yourself? Because, of course, I'll do a terrible, unjust job. Maybe just introduce yourself to our audience.
Yes, of course. I am Eleonora Scholes, and despite my misleading name, I'm Russian. I was born in the south of Russia, in the Caucasus.
Whereabouts in Russia?
It's a very interesting area, still Russia, the northern part of the Caucasus, near the area called the Caucasus Mineral Waters. So it is a really famous spa area in Russia. So we were, because the climate was good there, we were actually drinking wine, and wine was a very accepted drink. So, and then I moved to Moscow. I was doing some other things. I worked in a consultancy company called PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Oh my God! No way! Eleonora, do you know I was a consultant also for Pricewaterhouse? Oh my God, I'm gonna find out you're like my twin sister. No, when? That's crazy!
That happened. Yeah, I started in Coopers in Librand back in 98.
Oh no, you say you're younger than I am, because when I started, there was no PricewaterhouseCoopers Librand, only Pricewaterhouse,
Right, and I was on the Coopers and Librand side. And then I was actually working in marketing and we had to do the merger for PricewaterhouseCoopers. So that was one of my biggest projects back in that company.
Wow, that's so funny.
And then it was purely by, not really chance, but my interest in wine was started as a hobby. Because again, at the time, in Moscow, wine was either a really, really expensive prestige status drink, or there was some undrinkable stuff that was being exported and sold as a really nice European wine. So I wanted to know a bit more, and while traveling in France, that's where my interest in wine really started. And then we also were extremely lucky going to South Africa as a holiday near Cape Town. And we were staying, as it turned out, in a very nice wine region. So we had loads of time and we could explore in a very leisurely manner. And I absolutely loved South Africa because, the wineries were all geared towards wine tourism. They were welcomed people. And it was so easy compared to what was going on in France and Italy, which was almost impossible, to knock on the door and say, please, can I taste some of your wines? Or can I have a look at your winery? So that's how it started. That was back in late 90s. And then in early 2000, I wrote something. At the time, there was only one kind of wine-oriented publication in Russia. So I wrote just a small letter as a reader, not as a journalist or anything. And it was accepted, and somehow they contacted me and said, look, you're writing very well. Why don't you carry on? Because as you can imagine, back 20 years ago, there were very, very, very few people who could write intelligently about wine. So, and that's how it started bit by bit. And then it grew into being a full-time job. So I was a freelance journalist for the next probably 15 years. But I did study. I went to London and I studied in WSET. I think I was the first Russian doing that at the time.
Oh, you're kidding.
They were telling me that there were no record of any other Russians who were there, who were coming from Russia to study. So I did it with 100 points out of 100. I was very pleased.
That's amazing.
Right.
Oh my God! I'm sorry. I am an APP provider of WSET in Verona. How the hell do you get 100 out of 100? Was this level 2 or level 3?
Yes, I started with level 2 because at the time even that was a huge progress. That there was no formal education in Russia. So for me, just to see whether I can do it and whether this is something that I can carry on later as a profession. So for me, that was a massive challenge. But I'm quite used to being an achiever because I have, I graduated school with a medal, as it was in the Russian times, in the Soviet times. Then I went to the university to study English and psychology. So I also graduated with the best marks. So for me, if I do something, I try to do it very, very well. So getting 100 points was...
Well, Eleonora, there's a word for that in Italian, as you know. It's called secchione. And it means, of course, you're a super achiever. I love that word, secchione. That completely is you, absolutely.
Yeah, it grabs the meaning very well, the essential meaning. So that was at the beginning. And then also the very funny thing, Stevie, I'm not used to talking so much about myself.
No, that's what it's about. This is a special segment about diversity and inclusion series, and we talk women, leadership, and inclusion kind of series. So we'd love to hear about your personal story.
Right. So, and then back in Moscow...
do you have any secrets that we should know, like you want to tell everybody?
The secrets?
Any skeletons in the closet you would like to unveil? This is your opportunity.
This is my moment. Well, actually, life was very exciting and very easy. And I think there was no particular moment in my life that is not known to other people. So I think I'm pretty much exposed anyway. Going back to those times when, early 2000s, Russia was a very, very interesting market at the time because it was before China.
No, I'm not that old. I can't remember.
So there was lots and lots going on. But that was my impression from that time. And because, again, there were very few people who were wine experts, who were independent. So we were doing lots of interesting tastings, high-profile tastings. And when I had to move to Italy with my family, and it wasn't something that we deliberately planned to do, to go to Italy. In fact, I've never been in Italy before.
But is your husband Italian?
But my husband had to work here.
Oh, that's even worse.
He's British.
That's perfect. That's why you're still married.
Luckily, he doesn't work in wine business. So that's why, yes, it's a great combination. So on Lake Como, it was, of course, it's an absolute dream place to be. But unfortunately, we picked up the only place where there is no serious wine growing or winemaking. So my lifestyle has changed dramatically because all of a sudden, after Moscow, where you get lots of attention and you just have to choose whether you have to go today to Chateau Latour or to Gaia tasting, and then you get to Como, where you actually have to get out and find out what's going on in Italy and actually travel to all these places.
So I understand you're living in Como, is that correct?
We've lived on Lake Como for 16 years now, so I consider it to be to be honest, my home now, because I've never lived in one place for so long. So 16 years is 1/3 of my life, and we now have a house in a beautiful place overlooking the lake and overlooking the city of Como. So and I'm so absolutely happy here.
Yeah, I don't feel so sorry for you. I don't know if you were thinking I should be crying of your sad life here. Listen, so tell us about the pandemic period. How did you, in terms of personally, but also from a professional perspective, how did you survive? I mean, it's not over yet, unfortunately, but how did you survive the pandemic from where you're sitting? Were you able to travel? Were you able to go back to Russia? What was your life like?
You know, Stevie, looking back at it now, I think it wasn't really too hard to live through these times. Of course, they've completely changed certain routines, or, of course, stopping to travel all of a sudden. I was last time in Moscow in autumn 2019, and I could not go to Russia after that at all, and I still have not been yet. But there were certain things which perhaps helped me to cope better because I've always been on my own. So my base has always been at home. So in this respect, I didn't have to go to the office or anything. And I think the wineries were very good in the sense that they also switched to the new times very quickly, and it just became all very digital. The samples would be sent, and we would have lots of these Zoom tastings or online meetings. So that was probably the biggest shift. But I can't complain. As I was telling you at the beginning, it helped me actually to focus more on individual wineries, to understand their stories better. And I think that this one-to-one approach, I actually love it because I'm not the person who loves tasting hundreds and hundreds of wines. I do it because it's my job and I have to understand what's going on and how the quality is developing. But on the other side, I do prefer to do the storytelling. And to do the storytelling is, of course, you have to speak with the individual people. And this was an absolutely perfect time to do that. And I think also on the other side, I think all my neighbors here were very happy because I was getting lots of samples of wine. So, when there's so many bottles open, I think all our street benefited a little bit from that. So we were actually drinking Italian wines, not just at home, but also with the friends, and we're doing lots of aperitivo. And one of the very unexpected things which happened during last summer is I have a friend. She's a food writer. She's Italian, lives in Como. And she used to come to the aperitives, last summer when everything was closed. And then she approached me and said, why don't we write a book about the aperitives? I say, well, why not? Let's write a book. So we actually wrote a book together. She was looking after the Italian recipes, and I was structuring them to see which wines will suit and go with them. So this book is about to be published in Denmark. This is the first market, and it will be in the Danish language. So I'm really excited about it. So, that's one result of the pandemic, which I never expected, but it would never have happened if we weren't sitting at home and drinking nice aperitif in the garden.
So, congratulations. What is the book called? I mean, not in Danish, please.
Well, we wrote it in English. It's called Aperitivo, the Italian Happy Hour.
Well, the title, I think it's a bestseller already, Aperitivo.
Well, we are open. So the first market is Denmark. And if somebody is interested to publish it in English language, we are open for the offers. Why not? It's really...
Yeah, I'm completely interested in looking at your galleys.
Right, yes.
So send them my way.
Okay.
Of course, I'm a tiny publisher, but I would love to have a look. It sounds great. I'm really looking forward to that. Listen, so you took the opportunity to write a book during pandemic. So congratulations, kudos to you. I know you also, of course, is the founder and owner of Spazio Vino, which is a website dedicated to Italian wine in Russian. What did you do with the website? Did it accelerate? Because I think during the pandemic, a lot of the projects that we were working on completely accelerated. I'm talking, of course, about the Italian Wine podcast, but other projects that we were working on. What about for Spazio Vino?
Well, this is a good question, Steve. First of all, the reason why I started Spazio Vino, which was back 9 years ago in 2012, is I actually wanted to downshift a bit because at the time when I moved to Italy, I was writing about fine wines for the Russian market in Russian. But at the same time, being a person from Russia who was quite knowledgeable about the market and obviously with the marketing background, I was very much in demand as an expert to explain what was happening on the Russian market. So a little bit like a business analyst. So I had to do a lot, going to the conferences, explaining the Russian market situation, the trends, the importation. So these were two completely different aspects of what I was doing. I was also a correspondent for Wine Business International for a very, very long time. But at some point, I realized, and also at that time, I had to travel not just in Italy, but for fine wines, I was traveling all around Europe and also to Chile. So I never limited myself just to Italy at that time. But at some point, I realized that it was just getting too much. It was becoming a little bit uncontrollable. And in Russia, there's always been interest towards Italian wine. There's always been a really good mutual feeling about Italy, Russia, and Italian fashion especially. Food, Italian restaurants were extremely popular. So I thought maybe it's about time that I, especially living in Italy, I could stop and concentrate on Italian wines, just explain this diversity because it's extremely difficult to do that. And I don't think anybody's done it in Russian at that time. So my website was the first. And it's because people already knew my reputation, so they welcomed it. And it's from the very beginning, it became the point of reference for the Italian wines. I mean, I'm still keeping it more of a niche website. I do not have any plans of massive expansions. I've never had them. I thought I'll be writing, but I'll be writing well, maybe not so frequently, maybe not turning it into a huge portal. But the quality of information for me was the greatest priority, and it still is. I still do not rush to publish hundreds of articles. I do not so many, maybe, compared to other websites, but I'm trying to do it as well as I possibly can. So during COVID, the situation was quite interesting. On the one hand, yes, absolutely, there was a lot of interest to read more online. As you were saying, it's exactly the same experience. On the other side, I saw that people appreciating more the personal stories, because on the website I'm trying to be a little bit conservative. So for me, the priority goes to reporting information in a correct way, but maybe it's lacking a little bit of a personal approach. But I was using other social media channels, my personal ones, and I saw that the same things which were a little bit told from there, from my perspective, and maybe a little bit more opinionated. That sparked a lot of interest. So at the moment, I find it complimentary, but essentially, the website is mine. So people know that if they want some specific information, they go to the website. If they want to have a little bit more of an opinion or really the experiential part of it, then they read my social media. They both complement each other in a very, very good way.
So, I mean, are there other writers for Spazio Vino, or is it just you?
Well, I'm doing, let's say, 95% of work.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a friend and a colleague who is an excellent wine taster, and I really trust her tasting abilities, and we've known each other for over 20 years. So she is the person who really loves, she's more of a technical person, so she does like to go and do big tastings. So when there are big events like Anteprima in Tuscany, for example, so she's the one who would go and write tasting reports, which will then be published on Spazio Vino. So that's the only collaboration that I have. Otherwise, I do everything myself.
And who are your readers? Are they mostly from Russia? Do you have any analytics you can share with us?
Yes, well, you would think that my only market would be Russian.
Not only, but predominantly, right? Or not?
It is. It still accounts for two-thirds, but you would think that it should be like 90%. But in fact, the website is read by people all over the world because we just don't think that, even the former Russian republics, especially Ukraine, knows the website very well. And I used to work with some Ukrainian publications in the past, so that probably helped. But also places like Kazakhstan, for example, or the Baltic republics. And the funny thing is, even Israel or the United States, where there are lots of Russian speakers, which formerly came from the Soviet Union, maybe, and Italy in the end also accounts for about 10% of the readership. And I think it's more to do with the fact that when people actually are in Italy, traveling around and looking for some information about wine and Russian, so that's where they get it. They go to search, and Spazio Vino comes up well for specific search in Russian language.
So, of course, I remember meeting you in the very beginning when I started with Vinitaly. We reached out to you because you're the basically only Italian wine expert of Russian origin that was in our radar, and you did actually a couple of master classes for Vinitaly Russia at the time. So I've known you for a very, very long time. It seems like 100 years, but maybe 10 years. And you have been incredibly dedicated to promoting Italian wine. And I personally thank you very much for that. What are your plans? Like any exciting plans coming up the next few months?
It's a little bit difficult to say for the few months, but I definitely know what I'm going to do before the end of the year. And one of them being, apart from some travels to wine areas, which I always enjoy, one of them is, of course, being present at Wine to Wine event, which is your event.
Oh, yes, Wine to Wine. How can we forget about that? How did I forget about that?
And I'm really thrilled that I'm going to be a speaker at this event, Stevie. So I'm very, very grateful to you that after many years, once I spoke at Vinitaly in Verona, but again, that was quite a while ago. So I'll be very excited to come back.
Eleonora, I don't know if you know, I'm looking at the program now actually as we speak, and you are going to be also moderating a bunch of Russian importers, like tons. Like I see Daria, Svetlana, Igor, Angelina, another Svetlana. Of course, everyone in Russia is called Svetlana, but besides that, so tell us a little bit about what you'll be doing with the Russian importers at Wine to Wine.
Of course, we need to still to talk and to finalize some things. But I already see that there are lots of trends and lots of events which happened even this year, which are not necessarily understood very well in Europe.
Can you anticipate some of them?
Sure. For me, one of the most important topics would be to talk about the new law, which was passed this summer and which put to a certain halt and created a massive confusion in the wine market. This new law was about introducing new classification of wine, which on one hand is extremely useful and very good because it's bringing the classification of the Russian classification close to the European classification on wines. But on the other hand, it was not implemented very well in practical terms. There was no transitional period. The systems were not ready. The customs was using the old classification, and that created certain chaos. And even at some point, the importation of wine stopped. So I think this is a very important topic to understand, first of all, for the wine producers who may be confused what's going on in Russia.
But did that include the champagne? The whole scandal about the champagne classification?
To be very honest with you, Stevie, I think it was used as a communication excuse. In fact, the classification did not stop bringing sparkling wine. Okay, yes, it is now officially not called champagne anymore, and in fact, the protected origin is now only left internally only for the Russian wines. So if you're importing a wine from Champagne, it's just classified as a sparkling wine. But I would imagine if somebody in Italy decided to bring some Russian wine from a specific area, it would still be just classified as Russian sparkling. It would not have any specific, indication of origin. So in some ways, Russia is trying to make things a bit simple for the internal consumers. It just had to be communicated in a much better way to the European market of what's done and why it is done and how it should be done. And that unfortunately has not been done properly. So, and yeah.
Can you share with us another trend?
The other trend is obviously how the market is changing in terms of demand for wine. And I find this extremely exciting because now the Russian market is, apart from being one of the top 10 export markets for the Italian wine industry, it has become also a really, really dynamic one. I remember very well, 10, 15 years ago, it was almost impossible to bring something that would not come from, if it wasn't coming from Tuscany or from Veneto or Prosecco and Puglia. And these days, people are specifically looking for very, very niche wines. Of course, we are talking about, wine geeks, but I think this market, the premium market, is very good because nobody's looking more for brands. Of course, they're classical. This is a classic offer which will always be around. But people are more curious. They like to explore. And one of the latest things, for example, are wines of Etna, which is incredible. Or people are looking for Valle d'Aosta or Valtellina, something that was extremely difficult, almost impossible to talk about even 5-10 years ago. Or I also find that I was speaking to some producers, for example, even in Prosecco. Prosecco has always been one of the best sellers in Russia, even before the boom for Prosecco came in 2009. Russia was importing a lot of Prosecco even before that. And it still continues. I was speaking to producers this year, and I was surprised to know that they are really happy about the way that Russian importers take also specific products like single vineyards, which are called rive, which I know is a really difficult concept to explain even among the lovers of Valdobbiadene Prosecco, or Conegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco. But it seems like in Russia there is this segment of consumers who are very happy and prepared to know more about these things, to explore them. And I think part of the reason being is that the Russian consumers are relatively young compared maybe to other markets. So they are much more flexible, they are much more open to new things, and they are ready to have something which is not mainstream.
So yeah, everyone talks about China wine market, but Italian wine has not made any significant progress there in terms of market share. It's tiny, tiny, tiny still. Whereas in Russia, we often overlook, but Italian wine is very, very significant. So of course, Vinitaly, Russia has been successful, and we love to do events in Russia in general. In fact, I just want to remind the listeners that we do have, for the first time, Vinitaly International Academy for the first time on the 20th and 22nd of November. If anyone is interested, please go to see vinitalyinternational.com. One last question. What is I know it's like asking you who's your favorite child, but what is your Italian island wine? If you had one bottle to take to a deserted island, which wine would it be?
Right. Well, without going into specific names, I would say that it will be a wine based on Nebbiolo grape. So maybe it will not necessarily be from the Langhe. I'm also the ambassador for the Langhe wines, so I should really be talking about Barolo and Barbaresco. But I love Nebbiolo grape as a whole, and it's an expression also in the Alto Piemonte or in Valtellina. This is the closest wine region where I live. It's just incredible. And talking about Nebbiolo, yes, I will bring a nice pasta with truffles, white truffle from Alba. So that will be my absolutely ultimate getaway wine, whatever you call it, last supper, anything. But that would be my absolutely perfect match made in heaven.
Great. I'm getting hungry. It's only, I think, like 11 o'clock. So we can find you, spaziovino.com. Where else can the audience find you? What are your social media handles?
Well, mostly either on the Facebook and Instagram. This is one of my preferred channels. And I love it because it's very dynamic. So yeah, either the website or the Facebook or the Instagram.
Okay, great. So thank you for joining us. This has been Italian Wine Podcast with Eleonora Scholes. Thank you for joining us, Eleonora. And I will actually see you very, very soon in Verona at Wine to Wine.
Right, Stevie. Yeah, see you in a few weeks in Verona. I'm looking forward to that very much.
Ciao, grazie mille. Un bacio.
Grazie a te, Stevie.
And that's a wrap for today's special episode of Voices. If you were paying attention, we mentioned the Vinitaly International Academy's Russia edition is coming to Moscow and St. Petersburg from the 20th to the 22nd of November 2021. If you or anyone you know is interested in learning more about Italian wine, be sure to spread the word. More information can be found in the SoundCloud description box of this podcast. And if you liked today's show, go ahead and like and follow our show. Sin.
Listen to the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Himalaya FM, and more. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the show. If you enjoy listening, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. Any amount helps cover equipment, production, and publication costs. Until next time, cin cin.